usually does of a program, and we definitely can expect something knowledgeable through the business side of the art scenes and something to learn from that. And the beauty of what WBAI is all about is that we're able to give and share different perspectives of the world that you don't really take, you really don't really acknowledge, and how it's really the beauty of this whole thing is that we try to put the pieces together to create a bigger narrative of it all, to understand that, everything, there is a connection to everything. Anyway, with that said, it is 5 p.m. Stay tuned for State of the Arts NYC with Savona Bailey-McClain here on WBAI New York and WBAI.org on the web. Stay tuned.
Good evening. This is State of the Arts NYC, where we cover art. And tonight we have a very different program. I'm very excited about it. We are going to be talking with an Iraqi-American trumpeter, santur player, vocalist, and composer. That would be Amir ElSaffar. And Amir has really blended Middle Eastern music with American jazz, extending the boundaries of each tradition. And he will be performing at NYU at the Skirball Center this weekend. And we are most excited to have him because he actually is, very authentic when it comes to his fusion of jazz with traditional Persian, Iranian, Iraqi music. And I can really appreciate this blend because when you think of jazz music, which is America's first music tradition that's authentic and original, it has this folk element. It has this folk beginning. And he too has blended a modern and folk tradition from his family, and I think you really would appreciate it. We also have some cuts of his music, and we'll be blending his music with our conversation, our soulful conversation with Amir. So, Amir, are you on the line?
I am here.
Thank you.
For that wonderful introduction.
Oh, thank you so very, very much. I'm very, very excited about this because it really is interesting how jazz is moving forward, but by blending with other traditions. I'm hearing hip-hop artists and neo-soul artists, and now yourself, where you blend, these traditions from Persia and Iran and Iraq, and they go back as far as 400 years. And so I think our audience is really going to appreciate this. I know I've read a lot about you already, but for the benefit of our audience, tell us, when did your love of music begin?
It started very early. My earliest memories of loving music and sort of being feeling like a need to listen to music was when I was very young. I was probably 2 years old, between 2 and 3.
You remember that far back?
I do. Well, it's a very fond memory, but also was somewhat traumatic because I had this record of the Blues Brothers.
Okay.
That had just, I was born in 1977, which is the same year that the Blues Brothers came out.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to play it incessantly. Once I figured out how to put this LP on the turntable and put the needle on top, and constantly was listening to this piece and apparently singing along with all the songs. So, between 2 and 3. And then I must have been mishandling it because the record had a scratch and kept repeating and repeating. And so one day my dad picked it up and threw it across the room. And because it just, was driving the family crazy. And then I picked it up and it was even more damaged, and I kept putting it back on and insisting to listen over and over again. And that music was really influential on me. I mean, it was kind of set the path for what I would do later on in my musical explorations.
Oh, wow. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
It's
not
common.
What you expected, right?
No, it's common. When you like a particular song, you repeat it and you play it over till you either get all the words, so that you can sing it on your own, or you get the melody so that you can do that, and the rhythms. So it's very common. Kids do it. Adults do it too, if they tell the truth. But that's interesting that you started off listening to blues music. And so was that the only music that influenced you when you were a child?
A few years later, I got into Michael Jackson. That was when Thriller came out. But my real passion for music started around when I was 9, when I heard the Beatles, and that music really spoke to me. And I was really intrigued by the vocal harmonies and by the melodies, and it took a very quick sort of liking to this and understanding, and there's something very special about that music and the production and the arrangements and stuff. And that was when I decided to play the guitar. And so I picked up, started with ukulele and then guitar, and started learning how to sing all their songs, memorizing one after the other. And at that time, memorizing or learning music didn't feel like work. It was just, I would just listen kind of all the time. And so I spent the next several years listening to other music that was connected, like the Rolling Stones, and later on Led Zeppelin and Jimi Hendrix and Eric Clapton, which eventually led me kind of back into the blues and Muddy Waters and Robert Johnson and some of the local blues that was happening in Chicago, and then kind of brought me into the world of jazz after that.
Wow. And not just jazz.
14.
You went to trumpet, so you left playing guitar to go to trumpet, which is very, very different. Yes,
completely different. I had been playing trumpet in elementary school. We had a school band program, and I wasn't particularly interested in it. I mean, I loved playing the instrument, but the music that we were being given wasn't particularly challenging or interesting. So, I took lessons and played in the school band. But one day when I was 14 and I heard Kind of Blue, and I heard Miles' sound and just the way that he was able to speak in a way that I could relate, having listened to Jimi Hendrix and having listened to Muddy and all these others. It just suddenly made sense to me, and it was like this epiphany. And I remember immediately running downstairs to the basement where my trumpet was and picking it up and just playing and trying to get something close to that sound that I heard.
Wow, that's something. Yeah. Miles Davis has motivated and moved so many people, and he was trying to do a new sound as well. So then you start getting into playing the trumpet again, and then you're listening to Miles, and then you decided to blend those sounds that you heard with traditional music of your family and your heritage. And when did that begin?
That was quite a process. I had spent my high school and college years playing jazz as well as classical trumpet and playing in symphony orchestras and chamber music and studying all the sonatas and concertos associated with the classical repertoire, but at the same time gigging all over Chicago with jazz and blues and rhythm and blues bands. But really, it was after I finished school in Chicago and then moved to New York and started trying to find my way on the scene in New York, and sort of was overwhelmed by all of the different types of jazz, or different types of music that all somehow fell under the umbrella of jazz. It was pretty overwhelming, but the style that really spoke to me, or what the movement in jazz that really kind of resonated with me, was the music that Rudresh Mahanthapa and Vijay Iyer and Miguel Zenon and others, they were just getting their start. This was around 2000, 2001.
Okay.
But I could really relate to what these guys were doing, and it had to do with kind of connecting with a non-Western musical source and bringing it into dialogue or conversation with contemporary jazz. And that was when I decided to take a journey. I won a trumpet competition, and there was a monetary award, and I just immediately bought the ticket and went to the Middle East and spent a fair amount of time in Iraq in 2002.
Mm-hmm.
Thinking I would just spend a couple of months and get some rhythms and learn something about quarter tones and then apply it to jazz. And instead it led me on a 10-year path.
A 10-year path? Wow.
Yeah. I mean, in the midst of that, I composed some works combining jazz and Iraqi-American, starting around 2006, 2007. But really, it was a decade of just, traveling, finding teachers, staying on, living in the homes of Iraqis all over the world, and learning to sing and learning how to play the santur, which is an Iraqi hammered dulcimer.
Yes, I've been learning about that instrument. So it's like this trapezoid board with strings on top, correct?
That's correct.
And it's also percussion instrument as well.
Yeah, I chose the santur partly because I was really intrigued by the sound, and it just had something really divine in the resonance of the way the strings reverberate over a long time. But I also wanted to learn an instrument that was simultaneously melodic and percussive, because the music has both elements very strong, the Iraqi-American. So.
Wow, that is quite a journey, to say the least. Now, how dangerous was it at the time? Because weren't we still occupying certain portions of that section of the Middle East?
Oh, yeah. It was all going on then, and it was a particularly precarious moment. It was after 9/11, that it was actually just before 9/11 that I started researching Arabic music and learning how to play quarter tones, and I took some lessons with people in New York. But it was after that I won this competition that gave me the means to travel, and then in 2002 that I landed in Iraq. That was March 20th of 2002. And I spent most of that year in Iraq and studying, learning from whatever teachers, whoever I could find, and knowing that my time there was limited. So it was sort of, they hadn't quite declared a war on Iraq yet, but it was moving toward that. The sanctions had been in place for 12 years, so Iraq was already in sort of the infrastructure and the living conditions were not very good, and people were in a perpetual state of lack and fear of Saddam, who was the dictator, and fear of when the next attack would come from the U.S. But I managed to stay for a good part of 2002 until my relatives told me that it would be unsafe for me to stay any longer. That was actually New Year's Eve of just before 2003, and that's when I left. I left just pretty much immediately when they said it was dangerous for me and also dangerous for them. It was a very implausible story that somebody's coming from America to study music in Iraq, and it's like, do you know what's going on in the world right now? So, but I left, New Year's Eve, and then it was exactly a year later, March 20th of 2003, that the invasion began, and then the occupation. And I haven't been back to Iraq since then.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
But you know what? I was very impressed with the history of the ensembles that you're trying to develop with your jazz music. The Iraqi Maqam, is that how you pronounce it?
Maqam, yeah.
Maqam. That it's 400 years old, and it's an ensemble of different instruments, including vocals. And to hear that, to hear, this 400-year-old tradition with contemporary jazz that's really, a morphing of another different type of folk tradition. I'm trying to say that it's really inspiring because I thought for a long time that jazz was dying in America, and I felt that it was a shame, and so many people have said that too. But I was very happy when I participated in the New York City Winter Jazz Festival this year. I've been supportive of it, but I mean, like, I really went to a couple of performances and talks, and I was like, jazz is not dead in America. Jazz is alive and well, but it morphed. And that's what I liked about it. I said, oh my God, it absorbed all these other traditions that sometimes we take for granted that is American, and made this American music even more American. So it's great to hear that. I'm going to ask Reggie to start getting ready with one of your cuts, because I think people need to hear this, and then you get to share with us, the inspiration behind the music. But I'm very happy to say that jazz is alive and well. It's not overseas. It's still, kicking strong here, because every performance I went to the New York City Jazz Festival, the Winter Jazz Festival, was packed. I mean, like, overflowing.
Absolutely.
I was like, where did all these people come from? And they came in the cold, didn't care, had a drink, sitting back, chit-chatting with strangers. I did too. What did you like about the music? Did you like that band? What did you think about that sound? It was very engaging, because it was interactive. It was good conversations. That's what you really expect out of New York. And sometimes, you wonder if that is still here. Everyone's into their phones, but they don't seem to be engaged in conversations. So to actually know that you can hear good music and you can have conversation with people, you can be in a relaxed environment and feel like it's intimate and you're at home, that's good. And I'm glad to know that jazz is alive. And I want to encourage people to be supportive of artists like you who are adding new layers to this American, sound. And so I just want to check, are we almost ready, Reggie? Yes, we're going to play one of your cuts right now.
Great.
So, Amir.
Yes?
So tell us about this music. We had to cut it because it's very long, but tell us about this, because it's very interesting. It has this sort of Middle Eastern, but it also has a Mediterranean sound to it as well.
Well, the Middle East and the Mediterranean sort of overlap, geographically and culturally speaking as well. So a lot of what we understand as Greek music or Turkish music and Arabic music, Persian music, they have so much in common, much more that connects them than actually what divides them. Often the difference has to do with the language, or the rhythms, because the rhythms tend to stay more specific from region to region, and ornamentation and some of the really very specific stuff that goes on in the creation of melodies or the way that people render. It's connected to speech, basically, and way of life and environment. But the melodies, when you go really from Morocco, all of North Africa, through the Persian Gulf, through the Saudi Arabia, the Gulf countries, into Iraq, Iran, and as well as further east, Central Asia, Uzbekistan, you see so much of the same melodic material, and some places might highlight a particular type of melody more than others. But often the melody itself is not enough to distinguish where something is from. It's more about the nuance of how the melody is delivered.
So you know what I like about that, because you're talking about melodies, and that's very, in sync with jazz. But I've been doing a lot of research personally about the Silk Road, because I realized that we were taught the wrong geography in school. And I've brought a guest on to my show a couple of times, and his name is Karan, and he's a classical Indian dancer. And we were having a conversation one day, not even on the radio, we were just talking, and he was saying, Savona, Afghanistan, part of Asia. And I said, wait a minute, or Karan, wait a minute, back that one up. I said, I thought that was a part of the Middle East. He said, no. And then he started breaking it down again for me. And I was like, oh my God, I got my geography all wrong. So I started really doing thorough research to understand that the Middle East, what we call the Middle East, is really Southwest Asia. And then, it's like, when you look at human migration, they went from Africa, they went north, they went, south, in the Indian Ocean, and basically they crossed the straits that leads into what we now call the Middle East, and then into Central Asia, and the Silk Road was in the stands of Central Asia. And when you look at North Africa, those Africans were a part of the Windward Coast, and they were navigators, and they were good and proficient in languages. And I was like, great God, wait a minute, there's a whole lot of information we wasn't taught. And I thought it was fascinating. I thought it was interesting. And when I looked at the Silk Road, it wasn't just about silk, and it wasn't just about spices. It was about information. So people were traveling to share information. Did you hear? It was like, telephone. Did you hear what was going on in this country? Did you hear what was going on in that region? They were sharing information. They were sharing techniques. They were sharing different ways of, dealing with life, whether it was materials, whether it was with tools. And I'm saying, wow, what a whirlwind. And I did not learn that. So to hear you talk about that area and going as far west as Greece, to bring in Greece and Turkey, and then the stands, and then portions of South India, I was like, wow, this is really cool. So what has been the reception of your blending of your music with jazz?
Well, so far I see very, very positive reactions among audience members, and we've played this music. I mean, Rivers of Sound has played in the United States as well as in the Gulf, like in Oman and in Abu Dhabi. And then my Two Rivers Ensemble has done a lot of work in Europe, and I'm in Europe about half the year, involved in different projects. And it's sort of amazing how, if you describe something to someone, they might say, well, what does this have to do with that? And they wouldn't quite understand it. But as soon as people hear the music, it's just like they get it right away. And I had an interesting experience when we played in Abu Dhabi. The first few rows were Emiratis, like local Arabs that had, had families in that region for generations. And they really related to the Arabic side of it. Like they when I would sing like something like what I was just singing on the track we heard, they would get it and they would understand the words and sort of be right with me the same way as when I sing in a traditional Iraqi setting, which I do quite a bit. And meanwhile, there were, international students, because it was NYU Abu Dhabi, so there were American and students from all over the world. And they were getting it too. They were hearing something different in the music, so there's many layers to it. So from both sides, there was something familiar, and then this added context that was kind of like a new decoration or a new way of framing or responding to. And I think because for me the combination of sounds is very intuitive. I'm not forcing things together. It doesn't feel, my process isn't contrived. The elements just flow together in a sort of way that I don't even quite have control over. I'm just sort of listening and transcribing what I hear going through my head. And I think that perhaps because that's my process, it sort of expands not only to the way the musicians relate, but then how audiences hear it and understand it. So.
Okay, so now tell us about your upcoming performance, because maybe people may want to come and hear you perform. Yes,
I am performing tomorrow night at the Skirball, NYU. And it will be with my 17-piece Rivers of Sound ensemble. And we'll be doing music from our album called Not Two.
Okay.
Which came out last year. And we're actually playing tonight, where my band is on stage doing a sound check right now at Symphony Center in Chicago.
I hear you're in Chicago. Yes, you're a busy man.
My hometown. We were in Iowa City last night, and we braved the storm. They're calling it Mateo. They have a name for this.
Oh, God.
So we had a pretty intense drive, but we made it safely and in time for our performance tonight. So.
Well, I just wish you well for your performance tomorrow,
you.
And your publicist, Matt, has been wonderful. He sent me several cuts, so I got to hear some of your music. And like I said, he told me, he said, once you get to know Amir and just learn his story, you really will, feel what he's trying to do. And he was absolutely right. You're trying to do something new, and now New York is your home, and you teach at Columbia, and I live in West Harlem. So, so I don't know if you're in Manhattan or you're in Brooklyn.
I live in Inwood.
Oh,
so
okay.
You're downtown.
I'm not that much downtown. I'm in West Harlem. I know where Inwood is. So you're not that far. You're like 10 minutes on the subway. But,
we should meet sometime.
Yeah.
I hope you'll be at the performance tomorrow.
I didn't get a ticket, but I will see what I can do.
I'll arrange one for you. One. I'll give you a CD as well, so you can hear the rest of the music.
All right. Perfect. Well, then I will get to meet you tomorrow. You get ready for your performance, and I just want to thank you so very, very much.
Thank you. It's been really a pleasure talking to you.
Okay.
And I'm learning a lot. I'm learning more than you are, probably. It's really great to hear all of the way you're talking about the music. It's wonderful.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you.
Have a great evening. And we are back with State of the Arts NYC, where we cover art. And we just had Amir ElSaffar on our show. He is a very versatile jazz artist, trumpeter, santur player, which means it's a Persian stringed instrument over a trapezoid board. He's a vocalist. He's a composer. He'll be performing tomorrow night at NYU Skirball Center, and he's taking jazz into a different direction, adding traditional music from the Middle East with contemporary sounds, and I thought it was quite fascinating having this young man on the show. Now we're getting ready. I'm going to do a continuation. We're going to deal with Fashion Week next week because they're still getting themselves, organized and together, but we're going to hear from dr-kass from Washington, D.C. when I was there. That was another component of the conference that I was invited to at the National Press Club, and she's going to talk about her experience in being pushed into dealing with the creative arts and helping military vets with the effects of the war. So stand by.
Being a GW alum, I can't help but think back to when my mother, who was in Washington State, and I came out here to D.C. to go to medical school. I would call her on the weekends, and she would say, "How are the Hoyas doing?" Mom, I meant the other George. So, thank you. It's an honor to be with you all here today and have a chance to share my thoughts on the value and the impact of the arts in helping to heal our nation's heroes. Let me start by admitting that I don't come to this moment as someone who has been deeply involved in the arts throughout my life. Trust me, Bill can affirm this. I wish I was more artistic, but in a way, maybe my lack of artistic engagement further illuminates how profound my experience has been that I moved from this position of self-proclaimed non-artist to that of the position of ardent supporter. I'm here today as a passionate physician who's dedicated almost 2 decades to developing and implementing programs aimed at improving care for our service members, veterans, and their families as they're impacted by the wounded war. As you heard, my last job was to be the officer in charge of the National Trumpeter Center of Excellence, or NYCO, up at Walter Reed. When I took this position, I knew that the NYCO was the Department of Defense's Clinical Research Center for Traumatic Brain Injury and Post-Traumatic Stress. I knew that it had an evidence-based design that made for a facility that looked like no other military treatment facility I'd ever been stationed at. I knew that it had neuroimaging equipment that would help us to look more precisely at the brain than we had ever been able to look before. And I knew that there was a clinical care model there that was based on bringing together multiple different types of providers from different medical professions into one integrated team to work collaboratively in a patient-centered way to heal these complex wounds. Now, I'm going to also admit that I knew that this position was located 2 miles from my home, and so in the Department of Defense and in the D.C. area, that's like hitting the jackpot. So it was a no-brainer for me to say yes to taking the position of leadership there. As I became more familiar with the different medical professions that were integrated into this care team, I admit that at first I thought that it was nice, but they added some neat things like a labyrinth for meditation, or an art studio, or a music room. But it didn't take long for me, however, to understand that these locations and the professional services that are offered there are definitely not just nice-to-have capabilities that sit at the fringe of a patient-centered care model, but that these were need-to-have services that are at the very core of this effective model of care and are critical to their success. As the medical advisor for Creative Forces, I usually spend a considerable amount of my time talking about the impacts and the healing capabilities of these creative arts therapies. And I will do that briefly today, but I'm going to keep the remarks on the clinical impact short so that I have time to speak to other aspects of our program. I think you heard already some of the information about the impacts of these creative arts therapies. I can tell you that in caring for patients with complex injuries, getting that patient engaged in their care is one of the most important things that you can do, having them become an active participant in their care. Creative arts therapies, by the very nature of coming into a studio and having to create, engage you in your care. And that carries over to every other discipline that these patients work with. In addition, it gives them a voice to communicate about the injuries that they maybe didn't have when you sit in traditional therapy and just talk. You get to use a different part of your brain, a different way of speaking to control your own narrative of your injuries and what you're struggling with. And lastly, I think the other thing that is so powerful and impactful of the arts is it focuses on what somebody is capable of doing, what they can create, what they can contribute, as opposed to focusing on what is broken and what isn't working. And so those things, connectivity, communication, and creativity, to me, really are the sum of why this clinical program is so important. And as you heard, our patient exit surveys reflect this. The creative arts therapy is always ranking on the top 4 or 5 of the 40 different clinical services that are offered as being most helpful. They're also in the top 5 of the things that patients want to continue when they leave the NYCO. And while I was in charge of the NYCO, offering these services consumed less than 1% of my operating budget. So they are effective and they are saving healthcare dollars. I'm excited to reiterate that through congressional funding of NEA's Creative Forces program, we have now expanded to 11 clinical sites and one telehealth program. We are now reaching over 2,500 new patients a year and offering over 15,000 patient encounters. So the reason I wanted to keep my remarks on the clinical effectiveness short is because, as I said, there are other aspects of Creative Forces that I also want to speak about. We believe that care and healing must extend beyond the walls of the clinic. It must include a community in which these families live. Creative Forces is working to build strong clinic to community connections in each of the locations in which we have a program. This connection, or continuum, must allow for smooth transition of people in both directions, from clinic to community, and occasionally from community into clinical care. To build and enhance this continuum at the local level, NEA's Creative Forces is working with Americans for the Arts, the National Assembly of State Arts Agencies, and the state and local arts agencies in each of our 11 sites to host community engagement summits that everybody looks forward to. The summit brings together the clinical military community and the state and local arts organizations to learn about one another. We discuss military, and trust me, military cultural competency, and for those of us in the military, we learn a lot about arts cultural competency. We learn about the clinical and the arts programs that are offered in the community, and we brainstorm about ways to break down silos and build a better continuum. For patients who have benefited from creative arts therapies, we're building relationships and asset maps that will make it easier for clinicians to help that individual find a way to stay involved in the arts when clinical care is over. Much like a physical therapist might encourage someone to stay active or find a gym when they're done with their treatment. But what really excites me today is to know that this continuum is working in both directions. We know that approximately 50% of the service members and veterans who need clinical care for PTSD or psychological injuries never seek care. They either don't know how to connect to the services, or stigma prevents them from seeking help. As we build a better network, a better continuum, community arts programs play an active role in health and wellness, both through the therapeutic activities they offer, and I think you'll hear more about that today from our next speaker, but also because of the connection and the relationships that they're creating with the clinical programs. Last week, I received a call from our creative arts therapist in Tacoma, Washington, who provided a story that I think illuminates this fact. After our summit in Tacoma, the local planning team, spearheaded by the State Arts Agency in Washington, talked about how to improve clinical care in the community, how to create connections for the service members living at Joint Base Elizabeth Ford. They decided to work with the State Veterans Service Office at the University of Washington's Tacoma Extension Campus. And so the creative arts therapists, a few local artists, went to the college campus and met with the officer in charge of the Veterans Service Office. They described the program and Creative Forces and set up some arts activities for students there to get them engaged. And they established a relationship of collaboration. A few days later, a few weeks later, that same officer in charge called our creative arts therapist at Joint Base Elizabeth Ford and said that he had a service member in trouble in need of clinical care. Through their connection, they were able to connect the service member and his family to the clinical care he needed. The arts brought this group together and bringing more, and I believe that they will bring many more groups like this together across our 11 sites. I'm confident that breaking down those silos from clinical care in military bases to to the arts organizations and the communities will save lives. 11 clinical sites is strong, with strong community connections is a great start. And trust me, it's been a very, very busy year. I'm excited for the telehealth program that we are implementing because I think it will extend our reach into rural and remote areas and give them access to these services. I'm very excited about the resources that we are pulling together and putting on a national resource center that will help other communities to learn to build similar programs. Finally, I'm very excited about our research. Sustaining any kind of healthcare program, any program really, requires that evidence is in place to support the claims of effectiveness and impact. We currently have 12 research projects underway, and just last week we were informed of another article that's been accepted for publication that will bring our number of publications this last year to 5, which for a very young program is quite remarkable. In a few months, we'll be posting our research strategic framework and 5-year research agenda that grew out of a research summit we hosted earlier this year at the National Academies of Sciences that brought together leaders from creative arts therapy, behavioral health, and neuroscience. Working across this network and working with our DoD and VA partners, we are very well positioned to further explore and understand the impact of creative forces. I suspect that 2018 is going to be another very busy and exciting year. I'm absolutely thrilled to be a part of it. I thank you for your time and attention, and I thank you for all that you are doing to serve our veterans.
And we are back with State of the Arts NYC. I really wanted everyone to hear these various conversations because I was a little shocked too when I was hearing dr-kass, and she was even talking about Karen Pence and how Karen Pence was very supportive of what they were doing. And that really is just a slight morphing of what Michelle Obama and Jill Biden did when they were in the White House, and that was supporting military vets, making sure they get home, making sure they take care of their families. And now Karen Pence, in many ways, very quietly, not saying it, but she's supporting what they started too, but dealing with the issue of mental health and using the creative arts to help veterans so that they could deal with re-entering society and hoping that families can stay together by using the arts. So I thought that was very, very good. Hearing that, it was positive considering the political environment that we're in today. So I was grateful for that. We're going to take a quick music break, and then we're going to come back to talk about this winter fund drive. With State of the Arts NYC, where we cover art. Now, wasn't that a great musical selection? We got to hear Amir ElSaffar and his blend of contemporary jazz music with traditional Persian, Iranian, and Iraqi music with certain elements that go back 400 years. I think that's quite funky. It's magnificent. And he's going to be playing tomorrow night at the NYU Skirball Center. So if you're interested, go online, check it out, and you will learn more about that event. So this is why we ask that you support State of the Arts NYC, because we are really striving to bring just the arts in general, all of the creative arts, all the various disciplines to you so that you can learn what's going on. New York has always been a center for art and culture, but it's changing. And it's based on new technologies, and it's based on fusions that are coming up today, and it's with collaborations that take place. And we're sharing all of that with you so that you do not take this city for granted. This city has so much to offer. We love this city, and yes, it has its share of problems, but overall, this is a great international as well as American city. And sometimes you don't even have to leave the city to experience the world. Here you can hear Amir ElSaffar, or last weekend was Master's Drawings in New York, a U.S.-UK collaboration that focused on figurative works and their particular importance when it comes to studies. And that's why they worked with the Met to showcase the Michelangelo exhibition and other dealers who were also showing you studies by other artists, some well-known, some well not as known. Or the French Animation Film Festival, Animation First, for which I also attended their opening night last week, Friday. I couldn't believe it. There was like 300 people there. I mean, shoulder to shoulder. People are in this place, and everyone is wondering, where are we all going to go? But they were showing these adult films. And then on Saturday, you got to meet filmmakers, both students, professionals from Hollywood, and they're telling you about their studies, their influences, how they're pushing the genre forward into digital storytelling. This is what we are doing here at State of the Art NYC, and we're asking for this fund drive for people to just be WBAI buddies, to just, support us with a $10 contribution every month, and therefore help us so that we can continue to do the good works that we are doing. You can go to give2wbai.org. You could be a WBAI buddy, or what you can do, we have actually curated some very special premiums for you, and that comes from the Pacifica Radio Archive. We have Voices of Pacifica, Angela Davis. And I selected that because we just had Angela Davis on our show. It was from her presentation during the New York City Winter Jazz Festival, where she talked about feminism and jazz to a packed crowd at the New School with Terry Lynn Carrington, who was moderating. Also joining them was Esperanza Spalding. We also have for you the Contemporary Native American Experience, and that's with John Trudell, interviewed by Gustavo Raven. Silver. It's a CD. And we also, before the end of the year in 2017, had the head curator with us from the Smithsonian Native American Museum in Lower Manhattan to talk about their exhibition with light-based technology and Native American art. And it's still available. I think you might have a couple of days left to go down to the Alexander Hamilton Custom House in Lower Manhattan by Bowling Green. They have both their permanent collection and temporary exhibitions, and you get to see Native American art in a different light. But why not listen to these CDs and hear the various perspectives of different people, and therefore have a much more thorough, engaging, and interactive experience with these installations? That's what we do here at State of the Arts NYC. We want you to really connect with the arts. And all we're asking is that you become a WBAI buddy. You can just go to give2wbai.org, where you can make that pledge per month, or if you prefer, you can get one of these CDs, the one on Angela Davis, the other one with John Trudell. This is what we're doing. And why should you do this? Because we are planning special events. Like on February 23rd, we are so excited. We will have in the studio the Resistance Revival Chorus that came out of the Women's March in 2017, and they just performed with the artist Kesha at the Grammys that was held in New York City for the first time in 15 years. Now, folks could come into the Commons, they could get some food, they can get something to drink, and we will work it out where we will have folks in the studio, in our green room, or downstairs as well. We'll deal with the overflow, but we want you to connect with us with State of the Arts. We want you to hear them sing, and then we will have our talk portion where we will have a member, co-founder of We Are the Federation, which is a new arts group that deals with activism, and the Pop Culture Collaborative, 2 representatives, one from Brooklyn, one from D.C., that will talk to us about their efforts to bring about more diversity in the entertainment field. We're still waiting. We may have a guest host with us. I'm hoping that she will join us. But this all-female show will be on February 23rd. You should be excited, because we are excited to have such great talent coming into WBAI, welcoming the new year, bringing inspiration, bringing hope to clear out the chaos, to clear out the swamp with all that negativity that's going on, and ushering in some positivity, some hope, and some inspiration, so that we know we can make a difference. But more important than that, it's not just about protesting all the time. It's about living. It's one thing to protest, but after a while, you need to start living. And we need to live our lives in a manner where we can feel free and comfortable, that we can engage, we can learn to agree, to disagree, and really make our society much more humane, much more just, much, more fun. And so therefore, please go to give2wbai.org. Make that pledge today. We're asking you, you've noticed that the tone of our fund drives have, come down quite a bit, because we really want to connect with you. It's all about being upbeat. It's all about engaging. It's all about developing a real relationship with our listeners, and spread the word to your friends, your relatives, your colleagues, that WBAI is changing. So please go to the site. We want you to give. We want you to listen to us each week. We want you to have a great week. We're getting ready to get off the air. Thank you so much, and to our guests. And we hope to hear from you soon. Bye-bye.
To the current resident of the White House, the foul-mouthed orange man, we declare loud and clear, our peoples and nations are not S-holes. We are proud Africans who will not be disrespected by you or anyone. This is the professor, Dr. Ron Daniels, urging everyone within the sound of my voice to attend the #Proud Africans rally, Thursday, February 15th, 11 o'clock sharp at United Nations Plaza Park, 47th Street and 1st Avenue, to repudiate Donald Trump's racism and educate the world on how Africa enriched the United States and Europe. As proud Africans, we will protest injustice, advocate policies for a better future, and organize power to protect the interests of black people. All are welcome. For further information, call 212-340-1975. That's 212-340-1975, or follow us on Facebook at Proud Africans Empowerment. Be there.
Ladies and gentlemen, the award-winning Midnight Ravers will do a Black History Month Fun Drive show on Friday, February 16th, 2018, from 12 midnight to 2 a.m. Join us as we present 2 new exciting thank you gifts for your generous donations. First is our highly revered show, Juneteenth. Second is our most recent production, Fear of a Black Planet. So tell a friend, tune in, and show your support. That's Friday, February 16th from 12 midnight to 2 a.m. for our Black History Month Fun Drive show. Only on WBAI in New York, 99.5 FM. Miss it and hate yourself.
The Midnight Ravers, where every show is a special.
And once again, this is WBAI New York, 99.5 FM and WBAI.org on the web. This is a listener-sponsored community radio station providing you a Pacifica state of mind since 1960. And yes, if you're just tuning in for the first time and have been a listener of sort to WBAI, of its programming, well, guess what? We are in fundraising mode. Yes, we are in fundraising mode for the winter of 2018. We raise funds here. We make an attempt to raise funds here at WBAI because, first of all, we do not take any corporate sponsoring of any type. And also, we do not take commercials of any type. We are solely sponsored by listeners like yourselves. And so during these times of years, 3 to 4 times a year, we ask you humbly to please support our mission to inform so you can be better educated, be a little bit more enlightened, and also makes you a better person as a whole. I mean, come on. Yeah. 516-620-3602. Once again, the number is 516-620-3602, or go to give2wbai.org on the web. That's give2wbai.org on the web. And before we go into the next program, I just wanted to let people know that tonight at 7 p.m. at the Cathedral of St. John of the Divine, there is a free concert, Refuge in Music, Global Solidarity, in response to the statements of denigration towards immigrants and other cultures that have come from the White House. Singers and instrumentalists from all over New York City are invited to come to the concert and participate. Everyone is welcome, included in the choral pieces will be